BowmanDigitalMedia.com. Hello, good morning, everybody. It's another Marketing Monday with Ira Bowman, and my guest today, Holly Shannon. Holly, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me. That's some great music you had there.
Thank you. You get to see me dance while they're watching the screen there. I'm always in the background bopping and doing my thing, but I'm excited to have you on. You and I met on Clubhouse, Holly.
We did. I love Clubhouse. It's my little addiction.
You know, I'm not on Clubhouse nearly as much as I was. I was probably one of those who was addicted to it a little bit too, but you know, I have to run a business. I just don't have the time. I don't have the time to do it as much, but I met some really cool people and I'm glad for it. And I'm still on. I have two shows that I do. I do a show on Wednesdays called Let's Get Naked with Matt Crump and KJ and a few others. And I do on Saturdays, the Green Room for Saturday's Cup of Joe with my best buddy, Joseph Stepke. So that's fun. Hi, June. June's coming to us from Texas as well. And this is, I'm not sure. Oh, this is, I can't say the name.
We saw Michelle from Texas too. So we have Michelle and June, right?
Yeah, Michelle's from June. This one's saying good morning to you. He's on.
Good morning, LinkedIn user. It's not showing your name. I'm so sad. I can't see it on this end, but hi.
I think it's Satha Yaraj. I'm probably not
hello.
Right, but anyways.
Thanks for coming.
Good morning, everybody. Okay, so what are we doing today? We're gonna do something a little bit different. Have you? This is the question to the audience. Have you ever thought about starting or running your own podcast? If the answer to that question is yes, Holly Shannon's the right person to me. Holly Shannon is the right person to talk to you about that. If you're a company and you're thinking about starting a podcast for your company, Holly Shannon, she's the right person to talk to you about that. So we're gonna explore this thing in a book that she wrote called Zero to Podcast. We're going to talk about this in depth today. Okay. When I met you on Clubhouse, Holly, you were talking about some stuff, and I don't typically do this, but I said right then and there on the Clubhouse, I think I got to get you on my show, right?
Yay!
So Michelle has a podcast already. It's called Breakfast Burrito, and I've been on it a couple of times, and I really like it. So, anyways, and welcome, Jude from Nigeria. We get people from all over here, by the way. It's kind of fun. Okay. So if you haven't told us where you're watching from yet in the comments, we're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Go ahead and let us know where you're from. If you've never watched this show before, if you're new to the show, what we do each and every week, marketing is a vast world. Okay. And a lot of people don't understand marketing. Marketing, there is this thing, marketing is a thing, and it can be defined, but inside of it, there's a lot of segments, and that throws people off. So podcasting is a form of marketing because it allows you to communicate your message and to reach your audience. And it's something that I think a lot of people are interested in. They have heard podcasts. They've wondered about what it takes to get going, but they don't actually have experience. And I thought, who better to bring in than somebody who's written a book on the nuts and bolts, soup to nuts, everything you need to know to go from zero to podcast. But your book title, which I love because it can be taken a couple different ways. See, when I first heard the title, I thought, okay, you don't have a podcast and you want to have a podcast. This is the book for you. But this is also the book for the people that don't want to spend a lot to create a podcast. So $0 to create a podcast. It is possible if you read this book.
Wow, I like that.
Yeah, it's not intended, right? But it is there.
Yeah.
You can spend $0 and create a podcast as long as you have a smartphone. And you talk about that in the book. So as long as you have a smartphone, you could do it. Now, in the book, you recommend several times, it's not what I'm saying you should do. You want to spend a little bit of money and upgrade. And you talk about some services. They have free services in the book. that you reference. So again, if somebody doesn't have a budget, but you also tell people for a little bit of money, $20 a month here, $30 a month there, you can upgrade and do more. And so I appreciated that with this book. So there's a couple of different ways you can take the title. We'll get into the book much, much more later in the show. First, what I want to do, I want to let the world know who Holly Shannon is, because I have a feeling a lot of people are seeing you for the very first time, which is, yeah, I do too. And Holly, you have a marketing background, so we'll talk about that. This is our buddy, my buddy, Damon Pistolka. He is one of the founders of Exit Your Way, and I actually work with them as a marketing person in the LA area. So hello, Damon. Damon's up in the Seattle area. He's about to have minor surgery on his knee on Wednesday. So I hope that goes well for you, buddy. All right, so let's do this. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to pull your LinkedIn profile.
Ooh, no pressure there.
No pressure there. I'm going to pull it up, though, because I want to just go through a little bit of your background. So can you do me a favor? Can you, as far back as you want to go, to the moment that you wrote the book? Let's just do from, like, maybe, I don't know if you got into marketing when you were in college or high school or as a kid, whenever you started to be fascinated by marketing, but can you take us from that point to writing the book?
Well, I have a lot of traditional marketing behind me. So when I got out of college, I had gotten into international business, and then I had gotten into domestic trade shows, and I was on the exhibitor side of that. Additionally, I worked for the world's largest trade show management company in the world. And so I was doing really large shows all around the country. I went on to have my own business doing it. And then I was recruited by a boutique hotel and was doing some smaller scale. It was a very high-end hotel. So it was C-level, board level retreats that would maybe span 3 or 4 days type of thing. So I've always been in some sort of experiential event, conference,
Look at this.
that end of marketing. Yeah. So
you started working for them when you were like 6 months old, right? Because you're
yes, exactly. Yes.
right.
So we don't have to go there, but yeah,
Sorry, I didn't mean to bust you out, but I'm just
that's
saying.
all right. So I did a lot of large trade shows. Like, for example, I'd be working with hotel contracts for shows that would have maybe 60,000 attendees.
I love this too, by the way. Can I just pause you for just 1 second? Guys, I love when I see people who take the time to volunteer and give back. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome.
That's a thankless thing, but it's cool to see people.
It's important. It's important. And actually, it's part of why I like Clubhouses, because I just moved to a new area. I'm in DC now, and I was in Washington, Connecticut, and I actually had a huge network in Connecticut, and a lot of organizations that I worked with there. But when I left and I came here, it's all new for me, and I'm, just got established in my home. So I haven't really had the opportunity to give back to my new community. Yeah. So Clubhouse has actually filled that void and has allowed me to sort of create a mentorship at scale, if you will.
You and I are similar in that. So my wife and I moved down to Southern California from the Bay Area of California. So it's just, an interstate move. But we moved down here December of 2019. In 2019, everything was still open, obviously. So we were able to do some stuff until March, basically, of 2020, and then the world shut down. So we really only got to explore our local area for like 3 months. And, we had just moved, so we didn't have a lot of money, and we weren't settled in. So we didn't do any of that volunteering stuff. I actually got to do, because I do photography, it's one of the things that I offer. So I got to do some photography work for Christmas and for Easter for community outreach. And volunteer that way, which was kind of cool. But I miss volunteering, because it's a great way to give back. So
I do a lot of it. I probably spend more time giving my advice and sharing my experience with people. I probably spend more time doing that than I do making money these days.
Well, I run Project Help You Grow, so I do understand and appreciate that. It takes a lot. My project takes a lot of my time.
Yeah.
Let's do this. So you were in traditional marketing. You were in, like you said, you worked for the world's largest event in running
Management, event management, right?
running
And
events, right? So how did you go from that to podcast? What was the bridge?
oh, okay. Well, there's a little bit of a jump through there, but
Well, we can talk about the jump. We're not in a rush, so
no, that's okay. So when I left there, I started doing events, corporate events and private events on my own because I had changed. I had moved in Connecticut to another area.
What does that mean? Let's talk about that for a second, just in case people are watching. They're like, I don't know what corporate events. What does that mean?
So corporate events.
I think people get what trade shows are, right? I mean,
yeah, but I mean, it could be any kind of corporate event. So when I moved to this other part, I was recruited by a boutique hotel to do their corporate events. So when I say corporate events, we would have Harry Winston Jewelers, we would have Goldman Sachs, we would have Deloitte and Touche, we would have all of these different companies, and usually it was like C-suite level or board level, and they would come in for 3 or 4 days, and they would take a portion of the hotel exclusively, and I would work with them directly on their strategy, what their goals were for their time there. Sometimes it was, laying out, the whole year ahead, studying trends. So it was very confidential. We had to really craft their time, but then also sometimes there's some team building that went with it. So we were doing some different things, different types of events for them.
Fall backwards and I'll catch you.
I'm sorry?
Fall backwards and I'll catch you.
Yeah, exactly. So, it was a little bit of everything. And I would really, craft their time there from the menus with the chef and, the drinks and the whole thing. So it was an entire thing. Like, it wasn't like one little part of it. Like nowadays that people have like virtual events and someone's setting up the Zoom and everybody's at home. It's not the same thing.
Right.
Setting up an event for, 25 people or 2,500 people or 25,000 people, a live event is a completely different animal. And it takes a lot more hands and a lot more organization than 1 hour on a computer. So while I can appreciate virtual events and we need them because of COVID, I have a feeling we'll circle back around to live because I think people really do want to come together. But to answer your question, I was in boutique hospitality. So I was doing, really highly crafted, smaller retreats that were very white glove because this was a 5-star, 5-diamond Relais and Chateau property. And when COVID came around, we jump forward a little bit now, I was doing some marketing strategy work for Auberge Resorts at a couple of their properties and figured I would continue to work in that vein. And then COVID hit and the entire hospitality, tourism, travel industry imploded.
Yeah.
And that's how I leaned in on my other pieces of marketing, my content background, my strategy background, and got into podcasting. So it's a little bit like this, the journey. It's never a straight line for Holly, but here I am.
So I'm actually going to put this in the banner. This is a live poll question, guys. Are you looking forward to live events coming back? I, for one, am 100% in it.
Yes, I love it.
I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada. We know a little bit about hosting events out there, and that's the space we grew up in too. So we have some things in common. In fact, I've worked for some of the largest event production companies there are. So, and I was in the print space end of it. is where I
Mhm.
directed. And all the giant backdrops and all the stuff that goes on the floor and the wraps on the windows and the vehicles and all that stuff. So, anyways, that's the part that I did. But the thing that I like about in person is obviously we have more than one sense with the eyes. You have, the ears, and you have the nose, and you have uh, these senses that you can use in a lot of different ways when you're there in the same physical space that you can't use over a video screen. It just doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't work the same. Plus, there's something about body language that tells you something about people much more quickly than when you're just seeing them, like, I hate to say photoshopped, but we've all got now like nice lighting and backgrounds and stuff. In the beginning, when I started the show, I had to work with people much more on the lighting and the sound and all that stuff. Although we were getting a little bit of feedback in, but when it started, that was more of a deal. Now it's like everybody comes in and they're pretty much ready to go. We didn't really have to talk about your lighting or your
Mm.
camera angle or any of that stuff in the green room, right? It just people come prepared. But I like in meetings getting to
Yeah,
see things and touch things. There's products, like when you touch them, feel them, or
I
for
agree.
people who cook, and you want to taste it, or for people that play music and you just want to hear it, the ambiance and the opportunity to grab a drink with somebody and I hate to say just BS, but basically you could just, shoot the breeze and get to know them. It's so much easier in these events. Plus, it's nice to get out of the house. Can I just say that? I don't miss traffic,
Yeah.
but
Well,
it is.
yeah, I mean, I think what's lost, is serendipity. I think, the chance encounter, the, opportunity to have a meal with somebody, have a drink,
Yeah,
stand in line with somebody and have conversation while you're waiting to view a particular product or whatever. All of that is lost when
it's
it's a video conference.
yeah,
And while it has given a lot of companies a global footprint that they maybe didn't have before, and it has elevated their attendance, or their following, I'm not saying that it needs to go away. I'm just saying that it needs to be in concert with live again because I
but
think communities wanna come together.
the paradigm has shifted forever. It's never going back to the way it was. I'm not saying it's going to stay this way either. I think there's going to be a new normal, and the new normal is going to probably be some of the best of both.
Yeah.
Where you know, let me ask you, because I know for me, like I haven't put on formal wear since the pandemic started. Have you put on like a cocktail dress or gotten dressed to the nines, as we used to say, right? Like, I mean, I haven't gotten dressed like that. I haven't had a reason to. It's not that I'm opposed to getting dressed up, but I actually have a bow tie. I have like 4 or 5 of them. When I think
Are
about
you
it.
wearing a tutu right now or
I'm
gym
really
shorts?
not, but I am in shorts. And that's funny because it's actually funny. So, like you, I lost my job through the pandemic.
Mhm.
'Cause I was in the same space. I was doing print graphics for events. Guess what? No events, no job.
Mm.
So, I get it. Trust me, I lost my job too. But like you, through the pandemic, I found a new way to pay my bills. I started Bowman Digital Media, and here we go. I never wore shorts for 25 years to work. The only time I ever put a pair of shorts on was when I was going to play golf for work now. Was when
Mhm.
I played golf at a course that accepted shorts because a lot of golf courses don't. It's not part of the attire that they'll accept. But I live in the West Coast where it's really, really hot. When I say hot, really hot, like 110, 115, 120 degrees. So really hot. You don't want to wear pants all the time. But we did it because that's what I was walking around Las Vegas. I worked for a company called ARC. I actually worked for them twice. Okay. So ARC or American Reprographics Corporations, if you guys are familiar with that, largest reprographics company in the world. And I happened to work for them in Las Vegas, Nevada first. And when I worked for them, I was working for a guy, his name is Ray Martin from London. Ray Martin from London is old school. He's old too, but old school. And he's like, you guys wear suits and ties. I was walking around Las Vegas in 115-degree heat in a full suit and tie to self print because that was that was the dress code
Mhm.
for that job. Like, you want the job? This is what you wear. Okay, and I had them right. I did the same thing. I worked in it for a little company in Cincinnati, Ohio. Same thing. Guy was old school. Wear a suit and tie. You know,
Mhm.
90 degree heat with 80% humidity, and I got a tie on, sweating like a crazy guy. But so one of the things that's changed now, like I said, I'm wearing shorts,
Yeah.
and I don't see that. I don't see that going away because most of what I do, I'm remote. So
Yeah, well, and I think also, I think the tech industry really shifted the culture around, what was appropriate to wear.
yeah,
Because I think they were a lot more casual, like they were like past business casual into like, literally shorts and a t-shirt kind of thing. So I sort of feel like they already laid the groundwork and then remote kicked it into full gear for every other industry.
that's what I'm saying. So like I was in the Silicon Valley. I went to college, San Jose State. So in San Jose State, we're in Silicon Valley. We're they're way more laid back, right? The dress, the attitude, and all that stuff, more laid back. Some of the other places I've lived in Texas, in Ohio, they're more formal or more traditional. So there was a little bit of a lag there. But I think the pandemic, work from home, the remote, however you want to see it, there's a lot of people that are going to stay because they like not having a commute. They like the freedom of being a little bit more flexible schedule. And frankly, the myth of people won't be productive from home has been shattered. Like
Mhm.
whatever myth there was for however long, like people can't get the job done if they work from home is BS because I think the country's actually more productive than ever. So, but there are
Yeah.
people, who like to be at the office. There are people that are going to crave that. They don't want to work from home anymore. So I'm not saying it's going to stay this way either. I think it's going to go back. But there's a lot of overhead, reduction in overhead. When these leases start to fall off, a lot of companies will be like, why should I pay for all this office space? Why should I pay for all the stuff that goes into providing this office space when I can have people work remotely and save that money? I don't even think that that's all materialized yet because the leases didn't expire just because we were working from home. But as these leases start to fall off, I think a lot of companies will downsize their office space or eliminate their office space altogether, depending on the vertical market. But
I think what's hard for that decision, Ira, for a lot of companies, and a lot of them have already made the decision. When you look at some of the cities, like for example, New York City, there's a lot of people who live in an apartment and maybe it's a studio apartment or it's a one bedroom. Maybe they have a baby
oh yeah,
and they have possibly two people who are working. So their home space, their living space was never outfitted to
right,
be
right,
home and an office. So while it's advantageous for these behemoth companies to lose that big lease and all of that overhead, the fallout is going to be that there's a lot of families that towed the line for the last year, but it's not sustainable. The baby is getting woken up because there's an overseas Zoom conversation that needs to happen, and mom is on, at some ungodly hour in the morning, but she also got up twice in the night to nurse her kid. And maybe the father is on much later than anticipated, trying to take care of, again, maybe another Zoom meeting or some sort of project, and they're working on a different time clock because maybe they're working partially with teams in Australia or in India or in the UK. So I don't think it's sustainable. It's interesting because, I've had my podcast Culture Factor for the past year, and we talk a lot about what the new normal looks like and what's working for companies and what's working for the individuals. And, it is split. There's a lot of people who love working from home, and it's totally great, but maybe because they have like a kid away at school and they have a spare bedroom, or they had just upgraded their apartment and they have the extra room, or where they live, they're able to put one of those little tiny houses, those little like modified sheds in the backyard. But, there's going to have to be some sort of subsidy where families are paid a portion of their rent because everything's there. They're working from there. So now they don't get to live in it like it's their home. There's going to have to be something.
Well, I don't know. I think that's going to be just another one of those things. We pick where we work and people pick who they hire. It's probably going to facilitate some change, no doubt about it. And some people might switch companies, and because maybe they do offer a subsidy instead of like Google or Facebook or some of these giant companies used to have gyms and food and all this extra amenities, and they were perks to draw the best talent. That was the whole reason they would do it. So maybe, instead of providing that stuff, maybe a subsidy to, you can't really add on a room, but, to at least cover the expenses of or the pain or the harassment, or who knows. It'll be interesting to see how that all works out. But
absolutely,
certainly there's a lot of businesses that will be better off going back to the way things were, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like the event space, obviously you can't run events, not in-person events from your home. The people have to be there, right? The staff has to be there. So there's got to be, for any of those who are worried there won't be any jobs like in person anymore. No, there's going to be plenty of jobs in person. Everything event related, going out to eat, hotels, concerts, any type of event like that, you're still going to need a lot of people. And when people are out to the event, then all the businesses that benefit from that also will require people to be there in person. Because if you're doing something in Las Vegas or Chicago or New York City or Miami or wherever you happen to be, you got to have people there to serve them, right? To drive the taxis, drive the Ubers. You can't do your Uber from your home, so it's going to be in the car and driving and all that stuff. So I think there's going to be plenty of both. For the people who want to work from home, there'll be plenty of opportunities. But to your point, it may facilitate switching jobs again. Mm-hmm. But let's get back to podcasting, because we took a pretty big detour, which is fascinating to me. So I think it's been interesting. But I want to make sure we get into your book. So next thing I want to do, though, before we get into the book, because obviously it's on your website, I want to go to your website first, because I want people to see where they can learn more about you and what you're doing. And nobody answered my question about, are they looking forward to events coming back? So I guess it was a dud. I thought it was a good one. Anyways, that one. They don't always work. But this website is hollyshannon.com. Super simple. It's your name. I love it. I actually have a website, irabowman.com too. But I'm going to put this right here in the comments and pull it up so people can see it.
So I guess the big question is, are you your industry's biggest kept secret, right?
That is a great question. You don't want to be, right? If you are, we need to work on it. So how do you go from being the industry's best kept secret to not?
Well, that's where I think podcasting is such a fantastic tool. I mean, let's be honest, we all have our Zoom fatigue. And I don't know about you, but I enjoy listening to podcasts because they give me the opportunity. I call it editable content, because while I'm prepping dinner, or I'm going for a walk, or having my breakfast, I can catch up on, really great content. There's some incredible podcasts out there. There's like almost 2 million podcasts out there. It's on the rise. I mean, people like, Joe Rogan just got, the deal of a lifetime with Spotify. Podcasts are not dying. People say to me, yeah, I don't know, but are people listening to podcasts? Yeah, they're growing.
Yeah, it's just like Clubhouse. let's park there for a second, because just like Clubhouse, what made Clubhouse so intriguing to me, and I think it's true for a lot of people. You're not always camera ready. To your point earlier about, the employee who's got the baby and maybe she's nursing and stuff. She doesn't want to. You don't want to always be on camera.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's a lot easier to listen. My wife is a work from home mom. She has been for the last 10 years plus. She walks around with her phone, and she's almost always has a podcast of some sort on. Typically, because we're Christians, she's usually listening to a lot of sermons. But it's the same thing. She's listening to somebody give a speech. They call them sermons, but whatever. That's what she's listening to. But while she's listening to that, she might be doing the laundry. She might be doing a billion things. My wife we have 8 kids.
We multitask.
Yeah, and she has to. But she likes it because she still gets to learn something or entertain herself. She has her own business too. She's crazy. She's got all these things that she's doing. But the podcast, she listens to podcasts. She participates in podcasts. She's on a show with me. We do a show on Friday nights called 8 is Enough, because she doesn't want to have any more kids. And her husband's crazy. I have a hashtag #9, just so you know. Anyway. But what drew me to Clubhouse is the same thing as drawing people to podcasts. It's the fact that you can listen to it while you do something else. And it's good information, right?
Yeah. There's so much you can learn from podcasts. And I think why Clubhouse does so well and why podcasts do well is they are audio first. So you can really take in voices and the nuance, and you can really think deeply about things. But when all your other senses, when you're watching somebody on a screen and you're trying to listen, sometimes it can get lost, right? Like I love when I can just go in and just listen to beautiful voices. And, Clubhouse has been that for me. I've been able to hear voices from all over the world and all different ideas for podcasts. And for me, I've also learned a lot on Clubhouse. There's a lot of people on there that go on day in and day out, and they teach, they share what they have.
Yep.
I do it too. Like I said at the beginning, when you and I start our conversation, for me, Clubhouse has been mentorship at scale. I give away free advice all the time when I'm on there. I sometimes sit for 2-3 hours with companies and with individuals, helping them realize their idea and look at their strategy and figure out, what it should be and what's the niche and who's the audience and what's your end game. And, do they understand? Like, it's really kind of cool to be able to help people.
We're going to talk about all that in detail in just a second, because that's all in your book.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're listening and you just heard those questions and it seemed like overwhelming, who's your audience and what's your niche and what's your topic? If that is like a weight on your chest when you hear it and you feel like there's pressure, I want you to pay attention here. Like, let's hone this back in, because in this book, Zero to Podcast, you address all that. And that I do want to get into it because I think it's important. People are like, do I have to be an expert? You address that in the book. Like, you talk about these things. You don't necessarily look. I'm not the world's smartest person. I'm certainly not the most experienced marketer in the whole world. So why would somebody watch Marketing Mondays with Ira Bowman? Well, part of it is I bring on guests who know more than I do about things, and book authors who can teach others how. Right. So that's part of what you talk about. I don't want to give away all the secret sauce of the book, but we are going to get into it. First, though, before we do that, you are currently a podcast host as well.
Yes.
You host, is it Culture Factor 2.0? Is that the main one?
Is that what?
That's your main.
Yeah,
okay.
That's my podcast.
So this is it right here. It's Culture Factor 2.0. I love coffee, by the way, so I'm totally down.
Highly caffeinated.
Yeah, but I'm drinking water today for anybody keeping track. I'm losing weight. I've been working out, and I like to tease myself that I'm a fat man who likes to eat, and it's true. And I don't hurt my own feelings, but I'm also somebody who doesn't want to be fat. So I'm doing the necessary things to like lose the weight. So I'm drinking only water. I'm only drinking water today. But where they can find this, I'm on your website. And again, I put this on, actually I didn't put it on LinkedIn. I put that URL, that website that you're at.
Yeah. So hollyshannon.com. I have my podcast integrated right on there, so you can visit the podcast easily that way.
Yeah.
But I'm on all of the platforms. So wherever you get your podcast fix, whether that's iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Play, I'm everywhere. Okay, Amazon, so Audible.
Let's do that. Let's start with the book. I wanted to make sure that people knew that they could find you on hollyshannon.com.
Yes, please. Wait, hold on. I have to say the mantra. Please subscribe, rate, and write a review, because it is the holy grail for podcasters to be seen on iTunes with a somebody who is subscribed, rated, and reviewed. And same for the book. So if you have even 1 minute, now you don't even need that long, like less than a minute on each of those, I would be very thankful for that.
Very helpful. Also, if you want to help your local business owners out, when you go, we do what's called Google verification. And when you do it, when you're a Google verified business, you're then included in the maps. And if you could do the same thing that Holly just said on Google Maps for business owners, that really helps them too. Give them a 5-star rating, write them a little review. A lot of times you can help people in ways other than spending money. You don't have to, not everything has to be a spend. That's one of those things that helps raise their profile visibility. It helps with their SEO. So Google says, hey, I'm going to serve these guys up first because they're getting a lot of good reviews. So
boost.
Yeah. And
you're at a podcast.
it's just a little bit of time, but it can be a huge help. So let's talk about the book. Zero to Podcast got its name because you can, well, not for the same reason you said, but you can start with zero and you will launch the podcast. So this is from your idea to iTunes. Right. No podcast to podcast. All you need is this book. I mean, honestly, you don't even need the book, but if you get the book, it'll help you save a lot of time and do things better. Trust me. Now, it's funny because I think you and I talked about this when we talked. I skipped a lot of this stuff because I went with LinkedIn Live, and I had that built-in audience already with my social media network. So now I am on, in full disclosure, I'm on Spotify and Anchor. Okay. So I'm on Anchor. In fact, this show will be on Spotify because I go live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and then I go to Anchor and Spotify and add them. Well, actually, I add it on Anchor and it loads it on Spotify for me. But anyways, that's why I do that. So this show will actually be available in 6 places. It'll be on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Anchor, Spotify, and BowmanDigitalMedia.com. And I love that. I have that housed on BowmanDigitalMedia.com. The video version will be on the Marketing Mondays tab. And then the transcription, the written format, will be in the blog. And that, even though I didn't tell you this, will help you because it's going to be an active backlink to your website, hollyshannon.com.
Thank you so much.
You'll even get, a little extra backlink. It's a do follow link that you'll get from me to your website. I love that.
Yeah, and that brings us so cleanly into the idea of capturing those transcripts. People don't realize transcripts are long form content of interviews and different experiences you've had in your business. Maybe you've been on a podcast, maybe you've been on a live. If you can capture the transcript, that long form content is it's Google's love language. They like that long form content. And so if you can have that on your website, if you can capture that transcript that you participated in and put it on your website as your blog, write it as an article, however you want to do it, it's worthwhile for you from a marketing standpoint.
Well, and you talk about this in the book too.
I do.
Take that long form content and you can actually start to break it up and use it for social media posts. Which is,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah. Because then
I call them cut ups. Some people call them teasers. But
Mhm.
I just did this. So I'm on a show. It's once a month. It's called Lead Gen Ballers. And I've got, I'm actually a panelist. I'm not the host. I host most of the things of mine. But on this one, the host is Rob Johnson. We've got Sarah Scooter, Dave Meyer, Joanne Gore, and myself. And we're talking about how to take lead generation to the next level, get more out of your efforts. Okay.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you and I, in full disclosure, before the show started, we were talking about MailChimp, and that's the kind of stuff that we talk about on the show. Well, in the show, with any show you're on with me, there's going to be a little goofy silliness, right? That's just who Ira is. So there's a little bit of that sophomoric whatever. We were talking about golf. I actually didn't bring up the golf. Rob Johnson grew up with Phil Mickelson. So they're both from San Diego. They're the same age. They both play golf. So Phil Mickelson's professional golfer. Rob Johnson isn't. But Sarah asked him, because he worked at Torrey Pines, well, what was your lowest score? And he said 69. And I said something smarty like, I could do better. I've broken 100. And then he didn't realize I was joking. So he's like, actually, that's not how golf works. You know, the lower the better. And then our buddy Dave Meyer, who did get the joke, he goes, well, that's nothing. I've gotten 69 on a 9-hole course before. And anyway, so we were just goofing around. So I took that video, it's like 40 seconds, and I made a cut up out of it, and I'm promoting the show with it. Even though it's nothing serious, it's something to raise your visibility. Because you and I were talking about that, one of the reasons why people podcast, and why, if you're a business owner or you're working, you're in charge of a business, you're running a business, and you don't have a podcast for your business, consider it. And that's really who you're dealing with more often than not, right? You're dealing with teach a course on how to do all this, but also you coach people, right? So
Mhm.
business can hire you as a consultant to get their podcast idea from zero to fruition, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, well, I think businesses are in a great position to look at it as a tool because there's so, I said in the beginning, and I said it on the website, are you your industry's best kept secret? Well, very often there's so much wisdom and thought leadership and intellect and innovation happening within a company, but there's no way to really get that out there. I mean, you can post of some new thing that you're doing on LinkedIn. You can take a picture of something new you're doing in your company and post it on Instagram or Facebook. But it's hard for that to reach globally because you're always playing with algorithms. You don't know, did LinkedIn change the algorithm and now the 3,000 contacts you have, maybe only 200 are even seeing your post?
yeah,
It's the same for all of the social media platforms. So, by having a podcast, you get to curate who you talk to and you get to highlight all of the thought leaders that live in your company and all the tremendous things you're doing. And you get to say it in your own voice. And people get to learn more about your company and your expertise. You're sharing, as they say, value. You're not necessarily doing a sales pitch. It's not an infomercial. You're talking with people
yeah.
about different things that happen, case studies within your company. And then when you shoot that out to a global platform, I mean, I have people all over the world hearing my show. I mean, I started it in Connecticut. I was in the middle of nowhere. So if you think about that, I have people in, France, Germany, India, Canada, like all over the world hearing my show. So if you have a business and you want more of a global reach, more of a footprint, and you want people to really recognize what you're about, what better way than having a podcast? So
Well,
that's my
another thing that podcasts do for businesses on their websites is like when you create a website, you have to continually add new content, or people aren't gonna like. Look, if I come to your website the first time and I read it and it's interesting, great, so I don't bounce. That's great. But if I come back a next time and there's nothing new, I'm never coming back
Mhm.
because there's no reason for me to. I've already read it all. But
Mhm.
if you have a podcast or blog and things like that, that give your fans, your followers, a reason to come back, guess what? They will.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
if you wanna increase the amount of time that people are on your site, which is another statistic that matters, right? Not just how many visitors you had, but how many pages they saw and how much time they spent. These things are all tracked, and it's part of your SEO score, right? You
Mhm.
get your domain authority.
Right,
So
right.
you can get them to consume your podcast on your website. That's the best place for them to do it because it helps with your SEO on your website. So you
Absolutely. And
give them a reason to come back, and you give them a reason to stay for a while, not just to grab and go.
you're 100% right, Ira. I couldn't have said it better. And, the other thing that happens in all of that, another piece of it is all of the partnerships.
Yeah.
So, say you create a podcast where you, as the host in your company, moderates for 15 minutes, or maybe has a conversation with somebody else in the company about a new trend or innovation, and you're talking about how it came to fruition, and how it was built, and how you got to this place, and who it's for. And you could be doing that, but every time you interview somebody outside of the company, you create an instant partnership.
Yeah.
So you interview somebody from another company, and now their entire audience and your entire audience, it cross pollinates. So now all the people that would listen to Jane Smith from this other company who you're interviewing, they're all going to come over to your website and check it out. And when they post on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook or wherever it is they play, they're going to be calling out your company, and you're going to be on there. So the podcast is far reaching. It's like an octopus, it's got the tentacles going everywhere. It's not just you anymore. If you're constantly just interviewing yourself and moderating, then yeah, your reach will be global and you'll get that footprint coming in. But as you interview other people, you open the doors to partnerships and relationships, and that's where your leads are, right? That's where the leads live.
I want people to think about this from a different perspective too, and I'm gonna go somewhere here with it. So bear with me for just a second. But when you are interviewing, so you're a business and you're interviewing people from other businesses. That's happening right now, by the way, you and I,
Mhm.
okay? Because you're hollyshannon.com and I'm bowmandigitalmedia.com, right? I can take that email that includes the link to the podcast as Bowman Digital Media, and you can do it as Holly Shannon.
Mhm.
And we can email that out to other people that are potential. Let's say we're in sales and
Mhm.
we have a prospect list, and we think that they would be interested in, let's say in this case, launching a podcast. Well, that gives me something to send them. It gives
Mhm.
me, and it's not spam. At least I don't think it is, because now I'm saying, hey, I know your company would potentially benefit from hosting a podcast, and I just interviewed somebody who can teach you how to do it. And I might actually be more, in a sense, selling your service, but I'm trying to add value. And
Mhm.
so I want them to see me as somebody who just doesn't think of them as a sale, but I'm trying to help. And
Right.
so that's a way that it can be used. Now
I love that. I
you've
love that.
got
And by the way, feel free to email that to all of your friends and
I will be
colleagues.
I will be later. Okay, so check this out. But listen, I just want people to think about it from all the different avenues. The
Mhm.
podcast gave me something for my website, content for my website to bring people into my website. It gave me something for social media because now I have something to post about. I just
Mhm.
created a podcast with Holly Shannon. And by the way, when I did that, you created a couple more posts and you tagged me too.
Mhm.
So now there's more people tagging, right? There's more stuff happening. Now I've got SEO juice because I did the transcripts like we talked about, and I put
Mhm.
that up on the blog. There's more content for my website. Plus, Google loves it because it can actually read the
Right.
transcript. It's not going to do that for you with audio or video, by the way,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? You have
Right.
to have written format for that to count. Now you can still do your keywords, you can still do your subtitles, you can still do your metadata so that you can benefit from video and audio only. But if you transcribe it, you actually will get more. Take it for a minute.
Right. And it's more relevant content, right? Because when we speak, we're very fluid in our thought process. And if you're having a conversation with somebody, it brings up more topics. And it's far easier to take that transcript, have it live as a blog on your website than
Yep.
writing a regular newsletter, which, by the way, at a company, a newsletter gets beaten down in the mail, like no one ever reads it. And if it's a blog that somebody sat there and tried to write and has to do that on a weekly basis, it's almost like they're operating in a vacuum after a while. It's really hard to come up with topics. It's really hard to sound genuine and in the moment. And, life and innovation, things are happening all the time. So a podcast is so much more relevant, the conversation, and
it's easier to consume.
interesting.
The audio version is so much easier to consume, as I said. Like you reference in the book about 20-minute window for the average commute time, which I've never lived in a place where it was only 20 minutes. But and you live in the DC area, right? So you're not living in a 20-minute commute either, unless you're going 3 blocks. But but most people, in America, that's, I guess, the typical commute time. But there's advantages to all of them, is what I'm saying. A podcast, just like a video, I tell people this all the time. You could do a long form blog, you could do a long form video, you could do a long form podcast, and you can take it and use it curate it and use it in a bunch of different ways.
Absolutely.
And so the sales part, I don't think a lot of people think about. That's why I wanted to bring that up, because I do it with videos, I do it with blogs, and I do it with my podcast. I send it to people via email or direct message that I think would actually be interested in it. And I do mine one at a time, as you and I were talking about in the green room. I don't do mass emails. So I only ever send out one email at a time to one person. Right? That's the old school Ira Bowman method. It's not the most efficient way to do it.
But it clearly works for you. So
it works for me, so it's effective. But
okay.
Podcasts can do a lot of things. Now, for those of you who are sitting there, maybe you're a business owner or an individual, maybe you're an entrepreneur like me, solopreneur. Okay. If you're wondering, what should the podcast be about? Can you help them with that question? Because I know you addressed it.
Yes, I can. So it's really critical to niche down. And if you can niche the niche, it's even better. A lot of people will say the riches are in the niches. So however you want to pronounce it, niche, whatever.
I'm a niche guy, but it seems like the world has adopted niche, because I hear
niche,
everybody.
well, who knows which way you want to say. I guess neither is wrong, right? But
I think I'm old. I'm older, so it's niche, because I think that's how I learned it in college.
I always say niche. I don't know why, but nevertheless, it's so important, because you cannot be all things to everybody. Very often I'll have people come in a room on Clubhouse or call me, set up a consultation, and we'll talk about it. And I'll say, well, who is your show for? And they'll say, oh, I'm in health and wellness. So it's anybody ages 18 to 85, male or female. And, that's not true. You cannot cast a net quite that wide and expect to land. So once I start talking a little bit closer to them, maybe they're into some new modalities they want to talk about.
Another person that's a little bit older.
Well, like I'm saying, like, maybe they're into CBD, and they're into lion's mane and chaga mushrooms, and they're into keto diet, and they're into very specific things that are their specialty. So I think you need to drill down, like, what are the things I talk about, and then you have to, in your head, take a look at who is that person who would be listening to that. And a lot of that you can even get by the type of people that are already having the conversations with you. And you can sort of see where that's coming from, right? Where those people are. And maybe as you start to fine tune it, you're going to say, oh, it's really maybe more like age 30 to 45, and I am finding male and female, but people who are really into very strict dieting, whether it's paleo or keto, that seems to be the resounding voices coming to me. And then you can narrow it down, and that's what's so critical, because then you know the types of topics you want to talk about. Like maybe you want to bring somebody in who's a specialist in keto diets, and you want to bring somebody in who's got a range of CBD products for skin and edible. And, you start to target better who you're going to talk to and who that client is going to be. It becomes more obvious to you. And so that's why the niche is so important.
Well, yeah, and so when you're setting your topic, we kind of skipped ahead a little bit, but when you're setting your topic, when you're trying to hone in on what it is your show's going to actually be about, right? Before you even set a title, any of that stuff, you got to figure this out. And you use an expression which I really like. Okay, instead of demographics, you call it
yeah. Psychographics. Yeah.
psychographics. I really like that because so in the marketing world, I help people create logos and create everything, their mottos, their strategies, the brand, even to set the brand. If you don't know who the persona is, and I actually like the word persona, okay? So I don't use typographic or demographic. I use persona. Who is the avatar, if you will, for the person that you're going after, right? When you identify that, the rest of it becomes a lot easier. So once you have identified, I'm chasing these folks, I'm doing this topic, now you can set a title. You can, like you just talked about, you can start to identify who you would bring on as guests. Even look at Marketing Monday's logo there. It's a little bit tough. I'm actually going to change to make this easier on everybody. I'm going to do this real quick. Okay.
It looks like a metal, like heavy metal title from an album.
But yeah, so it's a definitely, it's not clean and easy to read. And then I changed with Ira Bowman is a different type of a font because I wanted that to be more personal, right? So when I was picking these fonts, that's the type of stuff that I was thinking about. Well, who is my audience? And I could tell you, but I don't necessarily want to tell you on the show. But I was going after some specific folks when I picked these fonts, and a little bit edgy, a little bit more, contemporary. That's who I'm chasing, right? And I have a whole persona built out of who those folks are. And then I set everything up. Even the people that I bring on are usually of a certain experience level. And and we're talking about things that address that. But why? Same thing with the podcast, to bring us back to the podcast. Once you identify your target, you can start to build on it. So if you're thinking about, gee, does my company want to launch a podcast? Gee, do I want to put out a podcast? The first thing I think you should think about is not your desire to do it, but who would you talk to if you could, right? Because maybe you start there because that will help you. And then again, in the book, you address this. I can't remember what chapter it is. I think it's chapter 2. But you don't have to, imposter syndrome. It's something that we talk about on my Wednesday show, Getting Naked with Matt. We talk about this all the time. What is imposter syndrome? It's this feeling that I'm not qualified. I don't belong in this space. But the fact is, you could be pretty much a novice and be a good podcast host as long as you express this in the book. I was trying to soft serve you.
Well, you have to work at it for starters. Like you have to put the effort in. You have to lift up the mic occasionally as much as possible. It's a muscle. I didn't have experience either when I came into it. And here I have a podcast and it's doing really well. So I think that, I had a big case of imposter syndrome when I started out because I didn't have that audio experience. And, you can get past it. It just takes repetition. Now I lift the mic up and I talk to people all the time with my podcast, and I do it with Clubhouse because I'm building that as a podcast as well. And And now I don't have that anymore. Like that's the beauty part of it. It's when something's new, you always feel that way. And then after you do it a few times, you're off to the races. Like it doesn't hold you back anymore.
Yeah. Well, the thing I was going for there was the curiosity, right? You talk about it. You could be a novice and still a good podcast host because you bring on guests who are experts.
Right.
And you ask them questions and you let them provide the expertise. As long the audience doesn't need to hear the right answer from you, the host. In fact, if you're doing it right, you're letting your guests speak, which I'm still working on that. Sorry. But, let them answer these questions. Right. So, you've got to pick. I'm just trying to walk people through because these are the fundamentals or the basics. So once you have the title, once you have the topic, once you have the audience identified, now you start to have to figure out some of the particulars. This is the logistics of it, right?
Right. So you get your topics together. You think about who it is you'd want to interview, and you should make a list of topics, list of people you could interview, and like your dream list as well, because I'm a big advocate of asking that dream list. You don't know who will say yes unless you ask. So don't assume that they won't. And then I like to give visual interest. You start talking about fonts and colors and different things like that. I think at this point, when you do have a sense of who your audience is going to be and what you're going to talk about, creating the podcast art kind of gives a little shape to it and it makes it feel, it's like creating a logo or seeing your name, right? So creating the podcast art, I think, is also the next component to giving a visual to yourself. It's kind of like creating a mood board for something.
I think it's important before you start asking people to come on your show, right? So when you're in this pre-checklist or this pre-podcast phase, developing this thing out, you're really just kind of spitballing stuff and writing it down and storyboarding and all that stuff. Before you would ever approach somebody to be a guest, you tell me what you think about this, but I think it's important that you have the name, you have the subject, you have the general day and times, because maybe that time slot is not a fixed day and time. You might have a show where you can record at any time and then you just broadcast it. Like mine are live. So the day and time is fixed, but you may not be broadcasting live, so you have more flexibility. But I think that you should have the show graphic also before you send it out, because when I send people an invite to Marketing Mondays, they see the logo. They see you know what I mean? That's everything I send out with Marketing Mondays has this graphic on it. I'm going to show it one more time because everybody's curious. That's what I'm talking about. That goes with everything Marketing Monday related. Why? Well, it helps with the branding, but it also makes it more official. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I'm thinking about launching this podcast. Would you be interested? Well, you just talked about it and you talk about it in your book too. Don't be afraid to have a wish list and ask. You're not going to get the guests that you don't ask to come on the show.
Absolutely. And I do agree with you. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I do agree. I think a certain amount of infrastructure will help you also feel more confident about picking up the mic and starting the conversation with people. You'll have the idea and the name and the art, and you will have built things out, and you will have your topics and your list and everything. The more structure you put in place for yourself to start, the more confident you'll feel when you pick up the mic, because you won't be sitting there in your head thinking, I don't even have podcast art yet. I don't even know what the background music's going to be when I start. What's my intro? If someone asks me to tell them what my show is about in 10 seconds, can I even say it? Like, try and get yourself to that point, because, a little bit of structure goes a long way in giving you a sense of confidence.
Why people
Will you fail if you don't do the structure? No, you won't. If you say to me, I fly by the seat of my pants, I'm picking up the mic and I'm going for it, then I'm going to say go for it, because I don't want you to not get your voice out there because you feel that the other stuff holds you back and you know that you'll get to it. Okay, fine. Fly the way you need to fly. There's no rule book to podcasting. I gave you the methodology I used because I was on YouTube University and Google University for a long time. And I was going through all of these old videos and all this stuff to get it together. And I said, you know, I don't want someone to have to spend as much time as I did figuring
Yeah.
this all out.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that my way, the methodology I give you is the only way. If you want to go from chapter 1 to chapter 3, because that's who you are, I'm not going to stop you.
Well, it's funny. So there's methodologies, right? And styles make fights, right? I agree with you. There's many ways to build the apparatus. But I think that the book is $15. This is what I think. It's $15. It's a framework. It'll
Mhm.
make sure that you're in the right place. But the reason why I was talking about doing all that stuff ahead of time is because you're fighting. Look, if you've never done a podcast before, you're going to fight imposter syndrome most likely. And it
Mhm.
may not even just be your own imposter syndrome. It might be from the people who know you, your friends and family. So if you can set all that stuff, the title, you've got the topic, you've got the guest persona that you're going after. You can explain in 10 seconds or less what the show is about. You've got
Mhm.
cover art. And this is what I wanted to get to next. And I don't know how much time you have because we're already an hour. We're over an hour. So if you're short, we'll have to wrap this up quickly. But the thing we haven't talked about yet is the particulars of how to do it, like launching, like use what programs to use, what equipment to use, and you do cover it in the book. So it's
Yeah.
there. Zero podcast, $15, by the way. So, but once you have all that, I think that there's a confidence level inside you that happens. It gives you confidence and will help you to ward off that imposter syndrome. But also, the people in your life that you're going to hope will give you support and encouragement, sometimes they're not the people that'll do that because they don't see you that way. They see you as an event coordinator or whatever, right? A print sales rep,
Mhm.
print graphic rep. Whatever you
Well,
do, that's how they
it's the stories, right? It's the stories that people have of us from our
well, it's the
past
history.
life, right?
Yeah, it's the history.
Um,
That's
but
that's how they know you.
I think that you can recreate yourself at any time in your life. I've done it numerous times. I've been in the event space. I was a jewelry designer for more than a decade. And now I'm a podcaster, producer. I build them for companies and individuals. So I think that life, as I said in the beginning, is far from linear for most people. And I think COVID had a good way of giving everybody a slap across the face, like, go ahead and do whatever you feel like doing because you're stuck at home for a year. And I think it's all possible. And I think what's unique to podcasting, Ira and I are in the same school of thought on this, that if you want to brand yourself, whether you need a brand voice for your business, you need it as an individual, you want better marketing tools, you want more interesting marketing tools, you want global reach, you want to highlight your thought leadership or your area of expertise. Maybe you just want to work on your public speaking skills. Like maybe you just want to kick doors open because you're on a job search and you want to reach new people that are not seeing your resume. Podcasting is a really cool tool for that.
So
So,
it's a way you can raise your visibility for sure. And
absolutely.
you want people to see you in a new way. Sometimes you got to take some time and do the work. You had mentioned a person, a different analogy, somebody who wants to fly by the seat of their pants.
Mhm.
If you just want to go, you got an idea and you want to get started. When you approach people and you don't have the title built out, and you don't have the art built out, and you don't have the topic completely under grasp, right, where you can explain it real quickly and succinctly, right? Don't be surprised if people look at you cross-eyed when you ask them to be on your podcast. Like, what do you mean? What podcast? What are you talking about? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
By following this,
You'll
let's call it foundation building. By
Right.
following this,
No, I agree with you. If you have a foundation in place, people will definitely take you more seriously. And you're not interviewing friends and family. You might be interviewing the C-suite. You might be interviewing companies you're interested in getting hired in. You might be interviewing companies you're interested in doing business with. So having a framework in place is definitely going to make you more professional, and it is
well,
the optimal way to do it.
it's gonna help
Um,
people's perceptions of you come around to the fact that you're
absolutely.
doing this new thing
Absolutely.
now. You said you've rebuilt yourself several times, you've reinvented yourself, and I guarantee you, every time you've done that, there you have had family members who struggle to see it in the beginning. It sometimes takes, you got to swim a little bit out in that lake before they start to see it. But when you now, I'm sure when you tell people you're a podcast host, no matter who they are, like, oh yeah, because how many episodes do you have in? You know what I mean?
Right.
You've done more than a couple, so this is not a new thing. Sometimes you just
Right.
gotta swim a little bit and have them see you, but it definitely helps
Absolutely.
the capital. Let's talk about this for people who they're comfortable now with the idea. Okay, I've got an idea. I've got some graphics. I've got a show name. I've even got an idea of who I want to invite. Let's talk about building the apparatus itself. What
Okay.
what what equipment do they need, and where do they need to go? You called this podcast hosting in the book, which is an expression I actually wasn't sure what you were talking about, so I kept reading, and I was like, oh, that's what she means.
Yeah.
But because I thought, well, aren't I the host of the podcast? But
Right. Yeah, no, I see what you're saying.
yeah,
So there's a few things that go together. So let's just walk through it like a bare bones. So
yeah,
let's just say you did your podcast art, you know who your audience is, your title, the whole thing. And now you're ready to really start the rest of the process. Now, I have different equipment on my website that you certainly can take a look at. I happen to be using
what makes
this one here. This one's the Samsung Q2U
hang on,
microphone.
I'm gonna
And
bring
I got this particular one with a whole kit. So it came with, so if you go under my toolbox there, I work with a company called Podcast Outfitters. And they were really great. They put together several different kits. So if you open that up, you'll see that there's this Samsung Q2U kit. There's an ATR mic kit because they're about the same. And I have some higher end stuff on there for when you graduate, but you don't need that stuff to start. Mostly everything there is under $100. So it's completely within your reach. This is a directional mic. It's a USB. That's really all that you need to start.
well, and I'm
So
gonna tell people. I mean, you say it in the book, and I did it. Okay, so I bought this. This is Moana. I don't even know how to say it right, but it's Maono. I don't know how you say that. I bought one of those,
mhm.
and I do a video podcast, right? So I also bought a Nexigo 4K webcam. So I'm using those two things. That's all I have, plus my computer. So you don't have to have $1 million worth of equipment. Now I have a
Yeah.
lot of other things in here too because I do photography and videography for a living.
Right. But I like to keep the barrier of entry low. So for
Yeah,
me, for podcasting, for under $100, you can get this kit. And that being said, you probably could go to even like a pawn shop and buy something used if you needed to. So it's never out of reach is really what I'm saying. And
I'll tell you
when
what. When you talk about this, I mean, look at this. That's $136. You've got the tripod holder there for the mic. You've got the mic, and you've got the headphones. Which a lot of people don't think about the headphones, but the headphones are critical for audio only because a lot of times you'll get, and you talk about this in the book, you'll get feedback and stuff that you don't realize you're getting it when you're recording. Then you go back later and you're doing your editing and you realize it's there, but it's too late.
Mhm. Right,
So
right.
just a little bit can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
That's all you're
And then
doing.
there's lots of so then you would record it, and there's a lot of different places you can do that on. I'm not going to make an exhaustive list. I do have it in the book.
Yeah,
I use Zencaster, for example. Ira's using squadcast.fm. There's many places where you could record. You could record on Zoom, although I'm not a huge fan of it. But there's lots of places to record,
yeah,
and most of them are free, and you can interview anybody from around the world, coordinate your times, and you can each go to that one link and you can interview them. You press record, and you're off to the races. And then you take that recording, that file. It's generally an MP3, an MP4, or a WAV file,
yeah.
and you're going to build that into your production side. So like say if you have an Apple product, you have free on there is GarageBand. And there are there's Audacity, there's Pro Tools, there's a few different softwares out there that you could use. You could also outsource that piece, although I'm a big fan of saying, try and do it on your own first, because once you stumble through it and you kind of have a sense of what you need, then you actually know what to ask for.
I actually used a program called Filmora 9. Filmora 9, there was a free version, just so everybody knows, full disclosure.
Yeah, there's so many out there.
$69, but when I did it, I wasn't thinking about it for podcast. I was thinking about it for film editing.
Right.
But in that, it takes the files and converts them. So there's conversions in there.
Right. Right.
To this day, I have Adobe Premiere. I have all the Adobe products. So I have Premiere. I use that for my video editing now. But I still, for my podcast, I use Filmora 9. You can use a lot.
Yeah, there's so many out there. I guess what I'm trying to point out is there's really no barrier to entry because there's a lot of free tools out there. Yep. And when you edit your piece, you're going to have your intro, maybe a little bit of layered intro music. Yep. Then you're going to have your podcast, and then you're going to have a little outro. And eventually in time, you can add things. You might want to add a little sponsorship or advertisement from your business.
Yeah, you want to make money out of this thing, right? And you talk about monetizing in the book, which I think is something a lot of people don't think about initially, but it is a viable commercial product.
Absolutely. So you can advertise your business on it. You can put all the show links on there. And this particular file will go to what was the other conversation Ira and I had, which is your podcast host.
Yep.
So a podcast host is the company where it's the platform, that you will upload your MP3 or your WAV file to. And what it'll do is it'll convert it to what's called an RSS feed, which stands for Real Simple Syndication. And that's where you will also sign up for iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, all of the different platforms you want to go to. And the answer is yes, you want to sign up for all of them.
All of them.
All of them. And
don't
be shy. Don't be shy. It doesn't cost you anything. Just sign up for all of them. Right. And then you're going to have a unique link that's yours. And a lot of those podcast hosts, by the way, will give you a landing page. It's just like a website, but it's just a landing page where your podcast will live. And if you have your own website, because you're a business, then of course you want to integrate that over to your website. But until you have that or need it, you're fine with just giving everybody the address for, I have a Simplecast address. And speaking of podcast hosts, there's many to choose from. They're all roughly 15 to 35 a month, depending on what level you need. I would say, some of them help with monetization. Some will add dynamic advertisements into it to try and get money for you. Some are free, but then they limit your time. So you have to shop around a little bit. I liked Simplecast. It was created by podcasters, so I felt like the user interface felt more natural to me. But it's not the only one. Libsyn's another one. There's plenty. I have a couple in the book, and I have them on my website with some deals if you want to click on those.
Yep.
But you can use whatever you want.
Let's talk about this for a second. So remember, I know that the book title Zero to Podcast is I don't have a podcast, and now I do have a podcast. That's it. But I'm still fascinated by the way I saw it too. The secondary way to look at it, $0 to create
$0, right?
Right. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to spend money, there's really two areas, and you say this in the book too, I believe. I don't believe it's my original thought. I think you say it, and I agreed with it. So I want to give you credit. One, buy the microphone and the headset, right?
Yeah.
That's a fixed cost. It's not a monthly cost. The second thing, if you're really going to do this, you should invest right here. Yeah. In the service, the podcast service itself. Right. So if you're going to go $0 to create this thing for, you can, the book actually will teach you how.
Absolutely.
But those are the two places where at bare minimum, I would suggest, like, if you're going to invest anything, these are the two
Right.
spots.
And Ira's correct. Once you buy, your microphone, that set for $100-ish, more or less, it's a fixed price. You won't have to buy that again. I've been using the same mic for the longest time, and I've talked to some of the biggest people in the industry, and they use the same microphone. So
Yeah.
I always said, well, I'll get this to start. It's the cheapest one. I was on Google University, and that's what I learned. This is one that was highly recommended.
Yep.
And honestly, I have absolutely no reason to replace it, and I won't.
Yep.
I don't see any reason why I should. And I've actually hooked this microphone up to my Rodecaster Pro, which is a much more advanced piece of equipment that you do not need. But because I record through Clubhouse, through my phone, and because I will ultimately travel and want the ability to add other microphones on for multiple people in a room, I needed that piece of equipment. But I do this for a business. If you're just one podcaster, you don't need that. Okay. So it's just the microphone and headset with the tripod. You're off to the races. Yep. And Ira's right. I think having a platform that hosts it, that you pay for monthly and has a user interface that you're comfortable with, that will be a recurring fee, but I think it's worth it in the end.
To me, it's about the RSS feed. I know most people don't understand that. They don't get it. But look, having that distribution, so it's your entry point and they're distributing it for you, is a big deal. Because again, if you're doing this, you want to be heard, right? Otherwise, you don't need a podcast to record yourself talking about something. You know what I mean? You can go on Zoom for free and hit the record button, and who cares? But if you want people to hear it, you got to have somebody's got to distribute the thing. And if you got a website that gets like 2 visitors a week, you know what I mean? That's not enough. You gotta have. So, in my opinion, that's the reason to do it.
Yeah. So the podcast host it's also just important if you have issues or whatever. Like I said, I happen to like them because they're podcasters first. So they have a blog that is about monetization and about, different techniques, and just it comes from a different framework. Like I feel like I'm talking to my people and not IT people, which is nothing wrong with that, but it's just a vernacular that feels more comfortable to me.
You just irritated the IT people watching. They're like,
yeah, no, but it's more because if you're an IT person, you're going to be more of an engineering background. So you're probably going to be way smarter than me, and it's going to go over my head is the point I'm trying to make. I need it simplified.
They all feel about us too. Like you guys don't get it. I mean, it is what it is. We all feel comfortable talking to people who use the frames as terminology and
right, which is why I break it down. Like SEO is standard. Is
search engine optimization.
Thank you. I go to say it and then I lose it. And RSS is real simple syndication. So that's why I explain it to people, because sometimes as podcasters, we're like, oh, you want your RSS link because that's what you're going to share with everybody. And I've had people say to me, but what's an RSS feed and how do I get it? Well, that's how you get it. You actually have your original file, which is a WAV or an MP3. It gets converted by your podcast host into an RSS feed. So there's no other way to get it from GarageBand or wherever you make it to iTunes without having that middleman. So just to let you know, that's what you need. And then, you have your content. So then you're off to the races. It's about repurposing that content. So you're posting the podcast, you're posting transcripts from it, you're making audiograms from it, and you're putting it across social media.
I want to caution people. There's here's your fatherly advice from Ira Bowman. Okay. And I don't mean that in a condescending way to anybody who's listening, but just like, right, here's some advice for you. If you're going zero to podcast you want to spend $0. Some of the free services out there trade you, giving you free service for they own the rights to the content. So make sure if you're not paying for this service that you still legally own the content, because if you want to do everything else, you don't want to be sued later, right? So
yeah. I think that has matured that situation a little bit. I think there is a certain form you could fill out to transfer from one podcast host to another now to maintain your intellectual property. But I'm not well schooled in that, so I won't go down the rabbit hole, but I believe that there is a formal form, some sort of T13 or some sort of form that helps people who in the past had signed up for podcast hosts and didn't necessarily own their content.
Yeah,
Ira's right, but a lot of the names out there we're talking about, you're not going to run into that.
So. Yeah, in fact, none of them in your book, but I do know of one that still that's their hook. They're like, yeah, we'll give it to you free, but we own you.
I think that's Anchor, isn't it?
Anchor does not do that, but there is another one that I know.
Yeah.
But I think Anchor used to.
Anchor used to, but I think they've changed it since then. Yeah.
But anyways, just be careful what you're signing up for. If you're signing up for free service, there's usually a catch somewhere. Just make sure. Like I said, that's just for the. I run Project Puppy Grow. Project Puppy Grow is a free service. A lot of people who watch me are looking for free stuff. So, I want to put that out there. All right, now, people have at this point in the journey, they have all the show stuff pretty much wrapped up. They've got a title, content, guests. They've got the host. Maybe they don't have the guests yet, but they've got the host service that they're going to use. So now they got the RSS feed. What's let's try to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes. So any final advice on do this that we haven't covered?
Yes. First of all, enjoy the process because I promise you, your first interview will not look the same as your 10th or your 20th or your 50th. So be gentle on you and know that you're only going to get exponentially better over time. Do not stare at downloads, subscribers, how you're going to monetize, and all of those things, because that is another rabbit hole. And in the beginning, there's something really beautiful about a podcast, whether it's for a business or an individual. It's organic. There's a lot of energy behind it. You're excited to really get your brand voice out there, get your ideas. You have a ton of ideas. The topics are endless. The people you want to interview are endless. Go with the energy, go with the passion, go with the enthusiasm, and I promise you the rest will follow. Sponsorships will come, downloads will come, organic followers will come. But if you're focused on all of the metrics and you're not just staying in your zone of genius, in the zone of passion, if you're not in that place and you're focused on the vanity, I guarantee you will go off course because you will be trying to please the wrong people or too many types of people out there. Stay in your zone. You know why you're there. You had the idea behind your podcast for your company or for yourself. Enjoy that process. I promise you the rest will follow.
Yeah, that's great advice for anything, Holly. That's like Holly's motherly wisdom right there. How to live a successful life. Okay, so I think one thing that I would like to say for folks, as far as I totally agree. I watched my very first podcast was called Project Podcast, and my very first interview, I did it on Zoom. So that tells you something just right there. I did it on Zoom, and I didn't set it to the right view, so I had speaker view only. So the person speaking was on, and half the time, like,
they weren't saying anything because you were speaking.
Right, there's interjections, and it's like, it was awful. And then the lighting was bad. I mean, just the whole thing, nothing was good about it except for my friend did me a solid by coming on and being my guinea pig, basically. And he knew it, so that was cool. But what you said about, you'll get better, I think one of the reasons, my wife is sitting right here, and I think it drives her nuts, but when the shows are over, I watch them back. So the advice that I would give here is, don't forget to consume your podcast too, and try to, consider how the audience sees it. In fact, I like to ask sometimes people who watch my show, hey, what do you think? What did you think of that episode? Because I'm looking for feedback that'll help me get better. So if you think of it like you said, lift the mic and you're going to get practice, and you'll get better. I think one of the ways that you get better is by keeping that desire to improve. You know what I mean? And don't be afraid. Like, oh, I've always done it this way, so that's the way I'm like locked in, and I have to do it that way. That's not necessarily true. You know what I mean?
Right.
You can shift gears and adapt. If you're doing this thing for 6 months, you said don't obsess about the numbers, but if you're doing this for 6 months and you're still having trouble gaining traction, then you might want to go back and look at some things like, the day and time you're releasing it. Maybe you want to consider shifting the host company at that point. Go, look, I thought this was going to be the one, but I'm not getting the results I need. The other thing is monetization. Sometimes we make more money by not monetizing with the commercials. So I just want to put that out there because you'll get more listeners. So try not to over spam it, is what I'm saying there. Right. So that's the advice that I would give. Again, if you're just watching now, thank you. Or if you're just tuning in now, thanks for tuning. This is Holly Shannon. She's the author of Zero to Podcast. This book, you can buy this book. I bought this book on Amazon. I thought it was $13, but you're saying it's $14.99, so you would know. So it's $15. You can buy it on Amazon. I have Amazon Prime. I didn't even have to pay for shipping. Got it. It's not a heavy read as far as like it's not wordy. So I actually like that. I was able to consume this in basically an hour, guys. So if you have an hour, you can read through it and get the major. I mean, I'm not saying that I haven't memorized, but all the questions that I've asked.
But you are a podcaster, so probably some of it was intuitive to you and you were able to skim it. But for somebody new, right? Maybe it's longer than an hour.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, it's a reference tool after that. Once you read it, this is like an instruction manual. Then just it's not like a novel. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I write content for a living. So I mean, I'm constantly building out websites and sales decks. So I understand that you want to say what you need to say in the least amount of words, because people will stop reading after a certain point if you embellish too much. So I try to make it tight, concise, to the point. And then the second half of that book is actually pages. It's like a journal or a workbook. So you could keep all your notes in one place as you're reading. If there's certain things that resonate with you or strike a chord, or you say, oh my gosh, I want to write down these 3 topics right now. The other half of the book is your personal workbook for the whole process. So you can keep it all in one place.
Well, and I like it too because you used a nice, easy, clean font, and I have bad eyes, and it's not too small. Like the writing, the font size. I'm just going to open up. I don't know if you guys. Well, no, you can't see.
There you go.
But anyways, the font is not so small, so it's an easy read. It's well worth. Look, if you're gonna start a podcast, think about this. I think it's an easy investment. So.
Thank you, Ira.
I suggest you get it. I will put that. Actually, we did because it's on your website. So, anyways, go to hollyshannon.com. You find the book there. It's also in her LinkedIn profile. If you go to Holly Shannon, which I've also put her LinkedIn profile, go there, and then it's in her featured section.
Yeah, and if you don't mind me adding one other thing, we're big fans of podcasts, Ira and I, because we both have them. But I do recognize the fact that there are some people that feel that they don't want to have a podcast, but they would like to be a guest. Yeah. And that's another marketing tool. Even if you have a podcast, you actually also want to be a podcast guest. But for those who don't have a podcast and want to start someplace, you can start by being a guest. And I have a course on my website that you could sign up for, and you'll get a nice link for it, and you'll be off to the races there. So if you go to store, click on the store. There you go. There's your course.
There it is. That's only $30.
Yeah. And it's very tactical, and it'll help you to earmark the podcasts for your wheelhouse and what you do very strategically. And that's a way for you to start. And I can guarantee you, after you get on a few podcasts, I have a gentleman that I just did this course with, and he got on 4 podcasts already. And he sent me a message. He's so excited because they're exactly the right kind of podcast. And he wouldn't have known how to get there if he didn't take the course. But what happens is some of the people who have taken this course from me get that podcast bug, and then they want to become a podcaster. So sometimes we approach it differently.
Well, and you talk about this in the book too, and I love it because I deal with this with the SEO stuff all the time. The keywords, like when you're back in that discovery phase, and you're trying to figure out, like what should I call my podcast? Is there another podcast that has the same name or title, or is it too close? And we talk about all that, the keyword research. I'm assuming a lot of that's in your course too, but the keywords is super important, right?
Mm-hmm.
So knowing who you're going after, knowing the topic, and drilling down and doing what we call long tail keywords is even better, by the way.
Absolutely.
One, like marketing, like how to build your digital marketing agency in Connecticut, for example. That's an example of a long tail keyword. Don't forget what I said, guys, about the sales. When you are on a podcast, when you host a podcast and you're emailing out to prospects, if you're looking for guests, that's a way that you can, if you're looking for guests on your show and you're in sales, like a lot of us are, reach out to prospects and invite them to be guests on your show, because it's a heck of a lot easier to get them to say, yes, I will come be a podcast guest on your show, than it is to say, hey, would you like to buy my product or service? Right?
Absolutely.
Most people are going to see that as spam. So it's another reason, if you're in sales or service of any kind, and you're thinking, why would my company want to host its own podcast? How about because you want lead gen?
Absolutely. It's 100% lead generation, because you get to choose the people that you interview, and you get to spend time with them in a discovery call, a 30-minute to 1-hour interview, and all of the correspondence that goes back and forth. They are possibly a customer in the making there.
Well, I could tell you from being in my whole life in sales that it's about knowing, liking, and trusting. And every one of these podcasts that I've hosted or I've been a show on, for the most part, I'm going to say for the most part, there's actually a couple, not so much, but for the most part, and they're usually the shorter ones. So this will make sense in a second, but it's rapport building, right? The number one thing is we're going to build a relationship. Like I like Holly Shannon. I hope Holly Shannon likes Ira Bowman. I don't know. I like
He's
her.
a nice guy.
I like her. You know what I mean? But I like her more now because I know more about her. You know what I mean? You spend an hour with somebody, and the odds are they're more likely to do business with you if you're doing it right.
Very true.
So if you keep things polite and professional, if you maintain as a host that curiosity, and you ask a lot of questions, you give them opportunity to shine, they're typically going to like you more. And then now you've increased or elevated your odds of making a sale.
Absolutely.
So even if you didn't get all the other stuff, even if it was just, I brought them in, I didn't raise my visibility, I didn't have all this marketing fodder for my social media and website and all that stuff, I didn't get any of that, but I only got the opportunity to build relationships with people that are prospects. That alone would be worth it.
Absolutely. Partnerships and lead generation, 100% every day of the week. Better than cold email.
I think this is actually now officially the longest episode of Marketing Mondays, but I think it's been a great show. I appreciate you coming on, sharing your knowledge, sticking with me for 1 hour and 40 minutes. Holly Shannon, you deserve like a cookie or something.
I don't know if anybody else stuck around, but all those people out in Texas and India, if you're still here, thank you so much.
Okay, so we had more people the first hour than we do now, but it's starting to climb back up. But like I said, it's funny. For those of you, again, if you're worried about metrics, I clued Holly into this before. I said, look, the audience live is actually going to be relatively small compared to who will watch after. That's one of the advantages of podcasts too. These things live on forever, basically, right?
Yep.
So
In the industry, it's called evergreen content. So somebody can download your podcast 2 months from now and still get value from it and still follow up with you.
Okay, so if you guys want to find Holly, find her on LinkedIn or find her at hollyshannon.com. That's actually the best way to find her. Okay, you can buy her book on Amazon. You can buy her book. Just go to her website. You can order the course. You can hire her as a consultant. Look, if you're a business owner out there and you want somebody to help you get this thing set up, contact Holly. She can help you.
Thank you.
Well, Holly, thank you so much. So we're going to turn on the music and say goodbye. But again, if you missed any of this episode and you want to find it, you can go to bowmandigitalmedia.com on the Marketing Mondays tab. It'll be there in about an hour. Again, we're on Spotify, we're on Anchor, we're on YouTube, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Facebook. We're on all those places. If you want to read the transcripts, it's in the blog. It'll be there probably by the end of the day. I use a service called Otter AI, by the way.
That's in the book.
Yeah, I take the audio and I translate it, and super easy.
Yeah.
Thanks, Holly.
Thank you so much, Ira. Appreciate it. Thanks everybody for coming.
Yeah. All right, everybody. You can find me again next week. I actually had my guest next week cancel. I'm thinking about flying solo next week because we talked about Canva, or we didn't talk about Canva.
I love Canva.
Let me pitch this show real quick. So what I'm thinking about doing is next week, I call them infographics. I'm going to design on air. I'm thinking about doing this. A tutorial on how you can create your own infographics, cover art, and things like that using Canva and in Photoshop. I'm going to show people how to do masking. So there's two types of design. There's destructive and non-destructive. I'm going to illustrate, I think, both. So it's going to be more of a how to do creative process on Marketing Mondays.
I think it's brilliant. I've been going on TikTok learning some more Canva tricks all the time. So
yeah, so I'm just going to give people some ideas on how to use create PNGs and do overlays and all that stuff. I think it'll be fun. I'm taking questions as always on that show. So if you guys have a question, hey, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you build out these frames so fast for your videos or whatever? Get those ready. If I don't book a guest, that's what I'll be doing. It starts 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time, Monday.
Perfect.
On LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. See y'all later.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
bowmandigitalmedia.com